that are doing well, they're not spending more per student, they're holding more students accountable to higher standards. They're raising the bar. There's a school district in New York that is blowing the doors off of education, and they're spending less per student. And all they did is they held their kids to a higher standard. And you interview those kids at that school, and they're happy. They're excited. Why is that? Because they pulled the pendulum of failure way over here, and they whipped it over to the success side. And those kids are thriving on it. They actually want more. It's very exciting to see. But we live in a time where they just want that pendulum to sit there. They don't want it to go too far this way or too far this way. There's too much risk involved in that. Let me ask you this. How does self-confidence occur? We all want children with self-confidence, right? How does it occur? Okay, experiencing success. A lot of mistakes can build self-confidence if you're trained and know how to handle them, right? If you don't, a lot of mistakes can hurt you. Yes, in the back. Okay, if you feel like you have tools for success, all right, so self-confidence doesn't mean that you figured everything out and you know how to deal with it. You know that as you approach things, you have the tools to figure out how to deal with it. I think that's a great comment. I love this picture. Yeah, I love the internet. So people do my work for me. Self-confidence cannot be built through empty praise. It can't. You cannot praise a child into self-confidence. You can't do it. As a matter of fact, when you try and they haven't succeeded, you're lying to them. And they know it. I'll give you an example. My boy was on a basketball team, and it was one of these younger teams where they didn't keep score. And I understand at that real early age, it's about learning the game, right? So they're not keeping score. And my boy's team got blown out. Just blown out. And they came off the field, and he's kind of, moping. And I'm all, great job, you guys did great. Keep in mind, they were not keeping score. What do you think he said to me? He said, Dad, we lost by 8 points. How old was he? 6? Okay? What does he think when I'm an adult saying you did great and he knows he didn't? What are you teaching your child? You're teaching him a wrong principle there. The correct approach would be to acknowledge their performance, and certainly you tried and you made some progress here and here, but next time let's work on this and this and kind of dissect it a little bit instead of this broad praise that they're going to process as a lie. Kids are so smart. They're so smart, especially today. You know your kids, they just blow your mind how smart they are and what they figure out. Blind and empty praise is very detrimental to your children because they know better and you know better. All right. Self-confidence can only come through continued success in the face of trials and adversity. It's the bottom line. If you take away, you've all heard that I teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. You've heard that before? There's a very important principle, and I teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. If they're not allowed to govern themselves, they won't feel success. If they don't feel success, they won't continue to follow the guidelines that you've given them. This is a very powerful principle. Every person in life needs a list of clear responsibilities and expectations and an understanding of the consequences for not following these standards, along with the reward. This list then becomes a roadmap to success. So I've just got some rules that come to my mind for proper discipline. Just some concepts that I came up with, and I'm sure you could come up with some more. The first one, expectations have to be clearly defined. How many of you have clearly defined expectations with your children? I'm sure all of you could raise your hands in some areas. You've clearly defined that they have to keep their room clean. What is the consequence for your children if they don't have their room cleaned? Anybody? Do you have a built-in consequence? There should be a built-in consequence. And that consequence can change, but they need to know in advance what it is. They need to know what they're up against. They need to know the reward, and they need to know the consequence. Identify what happens when the expectations are met. Identify what happens when expectations are not met. What's so great about this is it takes the emotion out of the equation because you defined it up front. So when they don't do it, you just go, sorry. Sorry, you knew what the consequence was. So there's not anger, and you're left with them dealing with their choice, right?
And they can't blame you.
They can't blame you. You defined it up front. But when you don't define it up front, and suddenly you're cracking the whip, and they're kind of surprised, right? Yes?
What happens when my son likes to negotiate at that point?
Yes.
Oh.
Is he negotiating when he's caught in trouble, or is he negotiating beforehand? When you set the parameter.
After.
See, no negotiation after. In my book, no negotiation after. If you want to negotiate with me, you negotiate when we're establishing the expectation. If you negotiate afterwards, then they know. What do they know about you when they're going to say, when they're going to choose in their mind, should I follow this guideline or not? What are they going to know? They're going to know I can weasel my way out of it. Negotiations are fine with your children. In fact, I recommend them, but in the expectation phase, not in the punishment or consequence phase. Does that make sense? There's a big difference. And I think my next note, always follow through or you lose. Always follow through or you lose. Because you know children are always trying to expand their territory. Just when you think you got something figured out, they've got it. My child has it. Hallelujah. 3 days later, they don't have it. Right? It's like they were just born again and suddenly you're working on it all over again, right? So they don't have it. All right, so again, always follow through or you lose. If you implement this system, I think you'll find life a little bit easier. And my wife will tell you, we have done very well in some areas. And in other areas, stuff kind of sneaks up on you, you know? You can't expect to know every choice they're going to make and have a predefined plan, right? You can't do that. But there are expectations that you can put on them. You guys, if I ask you for a list, what are some trial areas that you're working with your kids right now? You could tell me what they are. And I would ask you, have you defined clearly the expectation? Do they know the consequences? Do they know the rewards? Do you follow through? Can they weasel their way out of it? And if they can, they win. They've got you. And that's critical. All right, so we're back to this concept. Does this make sense to you? Does it make sense? The pendulum, you're getting sleepy again? Okay. All right, I want to add to that. This is a conversation I actually had with my 11-year-old the other night. It's a concept of her world as an 11-year-old is a world of constantly expanding and contracting freedoms. You know what I'm talking about? Based upon her choices, her freedoms will expand or they will contract. You know that. Do your kids know that? Do they understand that concept? Or is it to them that you're just always punishing them when they do something wrong? Or is there a design to it? Is there a reason behind it? Remember, your kids are very smart. I don't think we give them credit for understanding these concepts. All right, so this is what happens when you make a choice. When my daughter makes a choice, she either moves towards total freedom or she moves towards limited freedom. Right? Every little choice she makes will bring her in one direction or the other. More trust or less trust. Does that make sense? And she has to earn our trust. And we've explained to her, and again, she's 11, she'll remember and forget it, that the choices she makes now will greatly affect my decision to trust her when she wants to take out the family car. Because I'm going to reflect back and I'm going to say, wait a minute, you can't follow the little things. You think I'm going to give you a car? You crazy. Right? Not a chance. All right? So let's look at that example of, this would be for a teenager. How many of your teenagers